Leaders' questions. I call on Deputy Keller.
Just to say at the outset, Councillor, I'd like to wish you and your office and every member in this House a happy and a peaceful Christmas, and to thank the staff of all the political parties and the staff of the House as well for keeping this particular institution going and working on behalf of the people. Councillor, when you talk about vandalism, this week the HSE Service Plan was published, and that certainly was an act of vandalism. It was an act of vandalism in the sense that it was announced that it was going to be a service plan. But clearly, Minister, what has happened, it has been a plan to reduce services on a massive scale in 2014. When you look at the number of procedures that are to be cancelled in hospitals, when you look at the fact that breast check will not be rolled out for women between the ages 65 and 69, which will affect over 80,000 women, when you look at the fact that within the HSE Service Plan itself, they had the audacity to include 108 million of savings to be realised at some stage in the future without any identification of where those savings come from. So we're being actually asked, Minister, to look at a health service plan that clearly is incapable of delivering services before it even starts at 2014. Now, the Minister for Finance and others walked in here on October the 15th and published the estimates, and they didn't even stand up to scrutiny between the publication and the publication of the HSE Service Plan. Within that time, it was found that the probity issue with regard to medical cards of 113 million was a figment of somebody's imagination in government, an absolute figment. So, Minister, would you agree that the HSE Service Plan for 2014, even before it commences operation on the 1st of January, will simply not be able to sustain any credible form of health services in the year ahead? And I pointed out procedure cancellations, breast check cancellations, fewer medical cards, a massive reduction in frontline staff. All these key issues, Minister, are going to put huge pressure on the ability to deliver health care. And finally, in the context of the publication of the estimates, we were informed last week by the Minister for Health that the underlying deficit was 199 million. We now find in the HSE Service Plan that it is 419 million. So would you agree two things, Minister? One, did the Minister mislead the House in the context of the underlying deficit? And two, would you at least do a U-turn in the context of the breast check rollout?
Minister.
Thank you. First of all, Deputy, through the Chair, I want to thank you for your expressions of seasonal goodwill, which myself and my colleagues here in the government benches extend both to you and to all the other parties and deputies in this House. Dr. Jim Riley has a very difficult job to do, and he has to be given time to do that job. It is not easy. One of the issues that has been in the newspapers so far has been the issue of the 108 million monies that have yet to be identified, but which will be so identified within the context of the Haddington Road Agreement. Some people have suggested that the 108 million would not form part of the overall savings under the Haddington Road Agreement. I want to say very clearly that this is not the case. The amount of 108 million is and has always been an integral part of the overall savings target of the health sector, and the Government expects the full implementation of the Haddington Road Agreement in all sectors, including the health sector. Can I say, Deputy, in respect of the other matters which you've raised, that Dr. Riley will be coming into the House in due course, not today, but in due course, when the clarifications have been found in relation to the matters in the HSE Service Plan, and you'll have ample time as spokesperson. You'll have ample time as spokesperson for health for your party to actually go through the details with him, having regard to the fact that it was your own party leader who established the HSE in the first place.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, the problem I have here with this reply is that I don't even believe you. I think you believe it yourself. Because simply nobody in government believes Minister Riley anymore, and I certainly don't believe him over here. And the reason I don't is that the Taoiseach himself and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform have insisted on assisting him in compiling estimates. So his credibility is already shattered on this side of the House. But even with Cabinet itself, Minister, the Taoiseach, by his own admittance, has said that, look, I have to go in and try and help the Minister run the department. But the difficulty we have here is, not only is there unidentified savings of 108 million that we're being asked to, assume will not have an impact on services, it clearly will have a detrimental impact on services. And if you actually go through the full estimate and the HSE Service Plan, It is just not sustainable from the get-go. It clearly will not be capable of delivering on the basic services. We have heard time and again the issues with regard to medical cards, discretionary medical cards, cancellations of procedures, people waiting inordinate times just to see a consultant. And you are now saying that it's going to be a challenging year. It's not a challenging year for Minister Ruairi at all. It will be a massive challenging year for the many hundreds of thousands that will need the health services in 2014. So one more time, Minister, do you actually agree that the HSE Service Plan will be able to deliver a sustainable service next year without any cuts other than the ones already identified? Or will we be back again next January, February, March, highlighting issues with regard to medical cards, waiting times, hospital procedure cancellations and the like? And number two, did the Minister for Health mislead the House with regard to the estimate of 199 million?
For Health, as I've said, has probably got the most difficult job in this country, certainly in the Cabinet, in relation to managing one of the largest spending departments, of which you are familiar, a department which in many respects is at the mercy of demand-led services which in some cases are very hard to predict. I have every confidence in Dr Jim Reilly, and Dr Jim Reilly will in fact meet the target set out in the Health Services Executive Plan.
Thank you. I now call on Deputy Keevan O'Quailon. Deputy Keevan O'Quailon, thank you.
Minister, I wish to.
Sorry, please.
I would ask that you had the opportunity. Would you allow me the chance now,
Yes,
please?
thank you.
Minister Quinn, I just would also avail of the opportunity to extend Christmas wishes to all members of the House, to the County Corlia, to the staff, to the support staff. And I'd also like, as just a thought at this moment in time, that we have members of the Houses who have been unwell, who are unwell, and I think of our own Deputy Nicky McFadden, but also Senator Jimmy Hart, who I believe is still in hospital. And I'm sorry if I've left others out, but I would like particularly that we would join together in extending warmest greetings to them both at this point in time. The issue I want to address, and you probably thought when Deputy Kelleher and I were taking leaders that it was going to be on the same subject, but it won't. I want to address, because of the time of year that's in it, I want to address housing need and homelessness, Minister, and I hope that we can find some common chord in relation to that. I want to remind you that on the 7th of February of 2002, your colleague, now the Taoiseach, leader of your party, Eamon Gilmore, said in this House, and I quote, "The government's housing policy has been a disgrace, testified to by the fact there were 26,000 applicants on local authority lists when it took office. I estimate there are now about 60,000 families on local authority waiting lists. It is time the Minister of State, the Minister and the Government were swept from office and a government elected which will deal with the housing crisis." Now I ask you, Minister, I fully agreed with Eamon Gilmore when he made those remarks here in this House. But how do you, Minister, and how do your colleagues, particularly Labour Party ministers, now stand over the fact that the waiting list, the housing waiting list, is some 90,000 families across this state, which actually is 30,000 family units more than was the case when Eamon Gilmore made those remarks in relation to the last government? I think it's an area of great concern to many, many people. Now, the Labour Party also quite rightly condemned the previous government's failure to build local authority housing and their almost total dependence on the private rented sector and rent supplement in order to cater to the needs of people who couldn't afford their own homes. So do you accept, Minister, that your government has continued with a similar approach and that there has been a failure to address in a real and substantive way the housing need and the homelessness that presents up and down the length and breadth of our country, in our cities, in our towns and across rural Ireland? And would you not accept that the public monies expended on rent supplement would be better employed adding to a fund to create new public housing stock that will meet the needs of our people and be a part of the asset of our state going forward and to meet the needs of future generations in the time to come? I note that 400 million was expended in rent supplement in 2013, and I realise there is that need. There is unquestionably that need. but there is not the address of the some 90,000 family units across this state. And I would ask, Minister, I would ask, indeed I would appeal to you and to your colleagues, and not only in the Labour Party but in both parties in government, to recognise that this is a most serious issue that needs urgent address, and that at the earliest point in the new year that you would collectively pledge to address this in the way that it must be grappled with. There is no excuse for a continuation of a piecemeal approach here and piddling little efforts here and there. We need a substantial public housing building programme to meet the needs of those who have housing need currently, and that could be part of the generation of a new impetus in the economy.
Minister.
Thank you, Count Corley. First Deputy, can I thank you for the expressions of goodwill that you extended to myself and my colleagues on this side of the House, and in particular your recognition of colleagues who are not well, and the two deputies that you mentioned, and perhaps there are others, or deputy and senator I should say, that you mentioned, and perhaps any others. I think it's a sentiment that I fully and completely support, and thank you for raising it here. I share your concern, as does the Labour Party, and indeed many, many deputies in this House, about what has happened to the public housing sector. Its destruction under Section 5, the reliance on rent supplement that has driven so many people into a very difficult situation. We've had discussions in the Parliamentary Labour Party about this matter, as no doubt other parties have the same. Turning around the system will and is taking time. I know that Minister of State Jan O'Sullivan and the Minister for the Environment are working closely together. It is expected that 5,000 units will be made available in this coming year, which is a small sum of housing units relative to the figure that you quoted. I myself, as regards the practice in the Dublin area, and I think colleagues from all parties who represent Dublin constituencies, will be appalled on the one hand of local authority apartments boarded up, awaiting maintenance and waiting with people who would happily go into them and nearly do them up themselves. I know that Minister for State Jan O'Sullivan is in talks with the Dublin City Council officials, because it's largely a City Council matter, although the other local authorities have some rented apartments, that we get a more efficient way of utilising property that we own, we the state, we the local authority, that has not been properly utilised. I will bring your comments to the concerns and attention of Minister of State O'Sullivan, because I think we share a similar approach to this matter.
You cite the figure of 5,000 units, and I have to say that would that were the case, that we had the certainty of this promise, because my colleague, Deputy Desi Ellis, has been pursuing this with Minister Hogan and with his department repeatedly, but we can get no certainty, we can get no facts, no detail. Where are these houses, apartments to be constructed? Is there any decision at all in relation to such a rollout? It is not an adequate figure in any event, and the potential is so much greater. And the figures that I have cited, there is an even bigger problem, because there are those who can't get on housing waiting lists, and we know that that is the case. Those with no income, those with no valid lease for where they live. And we have the added problem in relation to rent supplement, needed, of course, in the cases that are there. You know, the increases in rent here in the city, 7.8% in the course of this year alone. You know, that's putting people outside the qualification thresholds for rent supplement, and in this situation, many of the landlords not cooperating with their tenants in relation to proper accounting of the relationship. So, I mean, Minister, are you aware that the Director of Advocacy at Focus Ireland, somebody you know well personally, a former General Secretary of the Labour Party, I'm finishing with this, I'm asking the Minister if he's aware that he has described the government's promised provision of housing units, which we've just been addressing, and I quote, as quite clearly a totally inadequate response to the scale of the problem we've got. So don't take it from me. Take it from somebody who actually embraces your own politics as warmly as any of your colleagues here in this House.
Thank you.
So I ask you, Minister, can you please utilise the opportunity of this last sitting before Christmas to give those people who are in real housing need and the homeless of our state some real prospect that your government will address this issue in a real and substantive way as early in 2014 as is practical.
I thank the Deputy for raising this matter. I share his concern. We are grappling with one thing that many administrations previously tried to do and found it very difficult, and that was to transfer responsibility to the local authorities from the Department of Social Protection, responsibility for the housing supplements. So you had the one body dealing with this area. Many people have argued for that in the past, including bodies such as the one that you cited. I will bring to the attention of Minister of State and the Minister for the Environment, as well as John O'Sullivan, the concerns that you've expressed, and I thank you for raising them.
Deputy Healy.
Count Corda, I suppose first of all I'd like to join with all for the Christmas greetings and the New Year greetings, and particularly I suppose the staff of the houses of the Oireachtas, including the ushers, caterers and clerical and admin staff who serve us and support us throughout the year. Minister, the right to keep a roof over their heads and to continue living in their family homes is one of the most cherished aspirations of the Irish people, and indeed of people the world over. That is why I make no apology for returning again to the question of families being bullied out of their homes or legally compelled to leave by banks bailed out by the Irish people. Minister, both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have refused to answer this question in recent times, and I am appealing to you today to address this question and to answer this question. It is not a difficult question, it is in fact very straightforward. And I appeal also to the Count Corla to ensure that the Minister does answer the question. Minister, for thousands of people across this country, the fear of losing their family home is absolutely palpable, is traumatic, and is giving rise to serious mental health issues right across the country. People even fear now the sight of the postman, in case he or she has that dreaded letter from the bank demanding the sale or the repossession of their family home. Since I last raised this issue just a fortnight ago, the rating agency Fitch has borne out my contention that thousands of families, up to 30,000 families, face the loss of their homes under the insolvency arrangements put in place by your government. Fitch put the figure at 26,000 families, and this is on the basis of information given to them directly by the banks. And Minister, we're speaking here about people on low incomes, whose only asset is their family home, who are fully engaged with their lenders, but who have no disposable income. And this is a situation that is widely accepted by people engaged in this whole mortgage distress area. People like the Advocacy Group New Beginnings, like the Free Legal Aid Centres, like the Phoenix Project in Portlaoise, like Grant Thornton, and indeed various personal insolvency practitioners across the country. New Beginnings have 1,000 distressed mortgage applications who see no way out except bankruptcy. Grant Thornton have a similar figure, and when they studied 1,000 of their case, they found that up to 50% face bankruptcy.
Question, please.
The question I want to ask you, Taoiseach, it's a question, Minister, is the question I asked the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach in the last couple of weeks. First of all, do you accept that there is a serious problem? And do you accept that there are thousands of families on low incomes, below the minimum living expenses, who cannot avail of the insolvency process and face the loss of their family homes? And what do you intend to do about that, Minister?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, and I agree with you that we should extend our best wishes and appreciation to all the members of the staff for the way in which this House has been run so efficiently. With regard to your first question, Deputy, my answer is yes. I do accept that we have a problem here. We've known it from the very beginning since we came into government. It was one of the many problems that we had inherited from the previous disastrous administration. The answer to your second question, You took 14 years to make a mess of it. Now I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't rush, Willie. I wouldn't rush.
Thank you.
You want to go to Brussels here?
I accept, Deputy, in respect to your second question, are thousands of families in fear at the present time? Yes, I do accept that. I have people in my own constituency who are struggling with that, and struggling with the fact that house prices, because there's been virtually a moratorium, a de facto moratorium on house building over the last number of years, there's now seen, as indeed Deputy O'Quillan was referring to it, a significant increase in house rents across the country, not just in the Greater Dublin area and Cork and Limerick. What we are trying to do, Deputy, is to ensure, with massive changes in the whole area of insolvency and mortgages, that systems can be worked out by the families and the lending institutions, including the two main banks, who have been massively recapitalised by the taxpayer of this country, so they could actually do what they're supposed to do in relation to this area.
Deputy Healy.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I'm not clear whether or not you do accept the problem and the question that I'm asking. Do you accept that there is a category of individuals, not individual families, but a category of individuals, numbering anything up to 30,000 families, who cannot avail of the insolvency arrangements put in place by your government, and who, because of that, are going to face the loss of their family homes, and will indeed add another 20 or 30,000 to the 90,000 already on our local authority house waiting lists, and avail of rent supplement at a huge cost to the state. Now, currently, the only solution for these families is bankruptcy. And I want to ask you, do you accept that that is the solution for these families? Because I certainly don't.
Thank you.
And I want to know, what changes are you going to make, is your government going to make in the insolvency arrangements to ensure that this category of distressed mortgage holder, who, as I repeat again, blameless people who are on low incomes, who have no disposable income, so they cannot avail of the insolvency.
Thank you.
What changes is your government going to make to ensure that these families can stay in their family homes?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Deputy, I think everybody in this House shares the concern, which in fairness to you, you have raised here on a number of occasions. For our point, this government has put in place a most comprehensive programme of actions to assist householders struggling to pay their mortgages. We have, well, I try and reply to your question, Deputy. We have rebalanced the rights of borrowers and lenders under the biggest shake-up of personal insolvency law in the century, and we've given those who bought their first homes during the bubble significant increases in mortgage interest relief. But that's not the end of what we're trying to do, Deputy. I accept the concerns that you've expressed. The figures are hard to calculate, but yes, they're of that order. They're of that order. And yes, under the system, it is inevitable that some people will be faced with the prospect of losing their homes because of the circumstances in which they find themselves. We are prepared as a government to look at what measures can be adopted in that set of circumstances, where some kind of rental agreement or some other form of intervention can be arrived at with institutions which in many cases have been funded by the taxpayer to ensure that the family do not lose their home. Well, whatever way it is to be done, Deputy Higgins, whatever way it is to be done, I don't think there's anybody in this House that wants to see anybody put out on the street because they can't pay it. Nobody wants that.
Thank you.
And we will take.
Sorry. Thank you, Minister.
We will take.
If you're not prepared to listen, don't ask the question.
Deputy, we all share your concern. This is an evolving problem. We've taken steps to resolve it in a number of areas. That doesn't mean we will not take more steps should that be necessary. And I'm of the view that I share with you that in some cases it probably will be necessary, and this government will not be found wanting.
Thank you, Minister. That completes Leader's question.